welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Today we are going to be talking about the TAP test for your dehydrated foods, freeze-dried foods, and canned foods. What it is, what you're going to be looking for, why you might want to do this TAP test when you're doing your inventory, and what to do if you come across an unsealed jar. You might not have to throw it out if it's dehydrated or freeze-dried, but we'll talk about that. I have a whole row of dehydrated, a whole row of freeze-dried, they're all different types of foods, and a whole row of canned goods. So let's get started. By the way, if you would like help building your food storage, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for our free 1-year food storage plan. We calculated a year's supply of food for one person, then broke that data down into a week-by-week list of items to build your pantry on a budget. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss all of our upcoming food preservation, pantry storage, and gardening tutorials. Now back to the kitchen. Okay, so first of all, what is the TAP test? So the TAP test is just literally tapping the top of your jars to check if they are still sealed. So as you are building your food storage, whether you're canning, dehydrating, freeze drying, all sorts of things, fermenting, regular inventory checks are very important because you don't want any food going bad on your shelf and stinking up your house, or worse, like exploding, like some horror stories have happened. And when you're doing regular inventory checks, it can be like a quick and easy thing or like a very long thing that you procrastinate on because you just don't want to deal with it. Ask me how I know. But the TAP test just kind of gives you an easy way where if everything passes the TAP test, then you're good to go. And if you come across something that fails the TAP test, then you can take that one jar off the shelf and do the other further inspections. So the TAP test is just tapping the top of your jars and listening for a difference in sound. A well-sealed jar, whether it's dehydrated, freeze-dried, or canned, will have a high-pitched sound, like that. So for this first row, we have 2 jars of sliced potatoes. These are all dehydrated, a jar of dehydrated beans, and a jar of dehydrated frozen mixed vegetables. 3 of these jars are sealed, and 1 is not, so let's see if we can hear the difference. So I'm sure you can tell that this one sounds different. So these are sealed, high pitch. This one, it just has a flat, low pitch sound, and that is the indication that it is unsealed. So if I were doing my seal checks and that's what I heard, I would be pulling this jar off the shelf, taking the ring off, because dehydrated foods, you can store the ring with the rings on, no problem. In fact, it is highly recommended that you do. And that's because when a seal comes unsealed on a dehydrated food, the food doesn't spoil immediately. It's not like a canned good when the food spoils as soon as that seal comes undone, the food's going to go bad. That's not the case with dehydrated foods. So you can absolutely store it with the ring on, and that way if you do lose that vacuum seal, that ring is still there to hold it down until your next inventory check, and then you can vacuum seal it if you want to. But one thing I wanted to note is that, and this is really strange, and I'm not really quite sure why, it must be like a shape thing, but there is a sound difference between a regular mouth jar and a wide mouth jar. Here, let's hear the, both of these are sealed. Both are sealed. It's not very different, but it just has a slightly kind of lower sound to me. Let me do this one. Between regular mouth, let me see, regular mouth, wide mouth. Those kind of sound similar too, but I'm telling you, I have so many times have gone and done seal checks where I would come across one that sounded like it was unsealed. I would take it off the shelf, do all my other checks, and it was totally sealed. And I would notice that it was the wide mouth ones that were sounding like that. So these two sounded really familiar, or really the same. So of course, while I'm filming this video, they sound the same, but I have had many times where I've come across a wide mouth jar that I thought was unsealed. Now I keep saying move through those other checks. So what are those other checks? The other checks are to, if it's not a canned good and you still have your ring on it, take it off. Do your, first do the button test. Push it down and see if it pops, and it pops. Whoops. And it pops. So if it pops like that, it's no longer sealed and not good. And of course, if you're able, if it just slides right off, of course it's not sealed. So the tap test is just the first stage. The second stage is always to do your button, to press your button. If it pops, it's not sealed. And if you're able to just gently take it off with your fingers and you didn't have to really pry it open, you didn't have to use your church key or a butter knife or something like that, then it's not sealed. But good thing with dehydrated foods is that even if it does come unsealed in storage, it doesn't spoil. It's not gonna, you do not have to toss it out at all. You're just going to reseal it and put it back on your shelf, or just go ahead and use the one that came unsealed, move that to your front of the shelf since the others are vacuum sealed. Move this to the front so that you use it first, and then you don't even have to reseal it that way if you know you're going to be using it within the next couple of weeks, if this becomes your working jar that you're currently working through. Okay, here is a row of freeze-dried foods. 3 are sealed, 1 is not. So let's hear the difference. So that one's super obvious, right? It's obviously this last one. Low, kind of dull, flat, high-pitched. So again, I would take the ring off. I would see if the button pops. It does. It's unsealed. I can gently take it off. It's unsealed. Now, with freeze-dried foods, it's a little bit different as far as what are the, do you have to toss it out or not? So my first thought is to not toss it out, because who wants to waste food, right? But when it comes to freeze-dried foods, they reabsorb moisture so much faster than just dehydrated food like in a dehydrator. So what you would have to do is then look for signs of moisture. The very first thing I do is inspect the sides of the jar and see if I see even the slightest bead of moisture on the inside of the jar. If I don't see any beads of moisture inside the jar, I'm going to move to the next check, which is to get a little cluster of whatever food it is in my hands and feel it. Freeze-dried food should never be soft. Never be soft, and I'm hoping soft is the right word, because freeze-dried food has like a styrofoam consistency. It is so light and airy, but it's still, you can still crush it, and you can hear a little bit of a crunch. Do you hear that? So you can still hear a little bit of a crunch. There shouldn't be any flexibility in it. I shouldn't be able to take this string. This is zucchini shreds, by the way. I shouldn't be able to take this string of freeze-dried zucchini and bend it. It should break. If it bends and it's soft like that, flexible like that, it has absorbed too much moisture, and I'm gonna have to toss it. So that's freeze-dried foods are a little bit more. We have to pay a little bit more attention to the post-seal checks than we do with dehydrated foods. Now with dehydrated foods, if a seal has come undone, like I said, I don't necessarily automatically re-vacuum seal it. I'll just move it to the front and use it. But when it comes to freeze-dried foods, I always reseal them. If I do the check, I determine that it has come unsealed. I do my other checks and determine that it's still good. So this jar was unsealed, but there's no beads of moisture. They're crunching like they should. They're not flexible. They're not soft, pliable. Then this food is still totally good. I don't have to throw it out. But I do absolutely need to go ahead and reseal it because of that issue, like I said before, of how much it absorbs and how quickly it absorbs moisture from the environment. And that vacuum seal just helps prevent that moisture absorbent from the air around it. So I'm just using my brake bleeder here, my mason jar attachment. If you don't have one of these, I will have them linked in the description box below. You heard that little spurt, very good vacuum seal. High pitch, I'm going to pull it just in case. Pull, 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 pull. Can't pull it, very good vacuum seal. So this is just the food saver mason jar attachment and brake bleeder. I will have these linked in the description box below. I have used these almost exclusively, whereas I used to use my food saver vacuum sealer machine, but it's just so much more convenient to pull that out than to lug out my big machine. Okay, now let's move on to canned foods. So I have some bell pepper soup, some zucchini salsa, a can of venison, and a jar of rendered lard. So again, 3 are sealed, 1 is not. Let's listen. High pitch, high pitch, high pitch, low pitch. So this one has come unsealed, and it actually didn't. We're having tacos tonight. So I feel like every time I film a video, we're having tacos. Oh, y'all might think that's all I eat. But anyway, so I went ahead and opened this jar because we're going to have salsa with our tacos tonight. But when it comes to canned foods, if the seal is unsealed, it's the button, I don't have to pull hard, it comes right off. When it comes to canned foods, you do unfortunately need to toss them out. You don't want to mess around when it comes to unsealed canned foods. I will say one caveat to that, and that is if it is a very high sugar fruit jam. The sugar in high sugar fruit jams is a preservative in and of itself. So that whenever that one comes unsealed, I will visually look for other cues, which is any kind of mold that's been on the top or smell. I've never had an opened thing of jam, go bad in between my seal checks. But as a general rule of thumb, if a canned good, a home canned good has come, or even store-bought, by the way, if you ever have a store-bought can and that lid pops in the center, you just want to toss it. But anytime, generally, when that seal is proven to be compromised, you'll want to go ahead and toss it, as hard as it is, I know. One caveat to that, and that's why I have this jar here. I had major siphoning. As you can see, this is spaghetti sauce. The headspace for spaghetti sauce should be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, which is about right here. So that's where the liquid should be, and that's where it was when I canned it. But I had major siphoning, which means liquid leaked out of the jars. However, the jar is still sealed. I've been doing regular seal checks. These were canned in, I think, July. It is now almost April, end of March. So it's been sealed this whole time. I continue to do good seal checks, but I want you to hear the difference between a canned, so this is sealed and this is sealed. Both very good seal jars, but listen to the sound difference. Normal, not normal. High pitch, really flat, low pitch, kind of as if it was unsealed, but we're going to press down on the button. It doesn't press at all. Now I'm going to try to pull the lid off. I'm going to pull like really good, and it's still not coming off. So why does this have a low, dull, flat sound like the unsealed jars? And that is because the siphoning. When the liquid seeped out up the top, a lot of the solids from the spaghetti sauce stayed on top of that jar. And I'm hoping, I'm kind of trying to tilt the jar, but you see that all that red at the top? That is spaghetti sauce that has stuck to the top of the jar. So if you have any food remnants that are on top of this lid, on the underside of this lid, it's going to make that low, flat sound as if it came unsealed, even though it's not. So that's why it's important to do those secondary seal checks if your tap test tells you that something is off. But if your tap test tells you something is off and you do your button and it's still sealed, you pull it, it's still sealed, tilt it, look up under there and see if there's food particles stuck to the lid. More than likely there will be. And the seal is just fine. As long as it is still really solidly sealed, you don't have to toss it out, even though the sound difference is really off. Okay, y'all, I hope that was helpful. I think that was it. I think that's all that I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this. Okay, y'all ready? Look at this tomato. Can you see it? The light's kind of, you see that tomato? He's smiling, he's so happy. I sliced into him, probably back in July, and he has just made me smile, and I couldn't throw him away. I was like, you know what, little guy, you're getting freeze dried, and I'm gonna set you up right inside that jar so that every time I open my freeze dried cabinet, I can see him smile at me. He's just too cute. Okay, I hope that was helpful to y'all. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.